Perhaps we're actually live now. We are live, Baruch Hashem. Hello. Pinch, yes, we're live. The question is whether we are live on the internet, but possibly also. So today we're going to talk about a great topic. Talk about shidduchim, matchmaking. Matchmaker, make me a match. Famous fiddler on the roof. And the reason we're going to talk about matchmaking is because this is the week. Last week, yesterday's Torah portion finished off with a few verses discussing genealogy, discussing the fact and really wanting to tell us that there was a young girl born, a baby girl born whose name was Rivka. She was born to a nephew of Avraham, so she's from the Avraham family, the same family. And the reason we are told that directly after the story of the Akedah, where Avraham is instructed to offer up his beloved son Yitzchak as a sacrifice, and then of course God stops him at the last moment and says, I didn't mean to actually sacrifice him, it was a test. The test is over, and now I know that you truly are Yirei Elokim Ata, you are truly God-fearing, you are truly committed to being a servant of God, and now let Yitzchak live happily ever after, and you, in order to bring a sacrifice which you came to the mountain for, there's a ram stuck in the bushes, go and offer up, he offered up that ram. Right after that we start talking about the birth of Yitzchak's match, of Rivka, who was going to be Yitzchak's wife. And Rashi comments that the proximity, the connection, the closeness between these two topics is after Yitzchak was almost brought up as an offering. He was 37 years old already at that time. Avraham started to say to himself, oy vey, if that would have happened, there would have been no continuation of the dynasty, of the line of Avraham, Yitzchak. There would be no continuation. I really should marry him off. Were he to have been married, then even if that were to happen, there would be a continuation in the children. So it's time to think about marrying him off. If I didn't think about it till now is definitely the time to think about it. And the Torah right away says that Rivka was born. In other words, his destined match, as we call in Yiddish sometimes, is Bashert. Bashert means everything is meant to be. The one that's meant to be his match, destined to be his match, is born, and her name is Rivka. And this week's parsha, we discuss the methods taken by Avraham Avinu to procure and to actually finalize this match into taking place. Now, of course, while we know after the story, we know retroactively that Rivka was destined to be Yitzchak's match. So for us it fits in like a puzzle. The Torah tells us that Yitzchak was about to be offered up as a sacrifice. Hashem stopped at the last moment, and all of a sudden it tells us that there was a young maiden called Rivka born. It doesn't tell us about all the births of all the girls born during that time. So we already see right away, that would be a good match. But don't forget, to them living at that time, they weren't privy to that information, and Avraham had to do what needs to be done according to the ways of nature, and that is to go and look for a match. But as we'll see, as we know the story, he doesn't actually follow fully the dictates of nature, he only goes through the motions, but actually what happens is rather divinely orchestrated. So we start with the Psukim in text 1a, the Psukim of this week's portion, that says, Avraham was now old, advanced in years, page 84, and Hashem had blessed Avraham in all things. And actually the commentaries say, what does the word bakol mean? If you do the numerical value of kol, bakol is 2, the base is 2, chaf is 20, lamed is 30. 2 plus 20 plus 30 is 52. 52 has the same numerical value as ben. Ben means son. So here there's an allusion to Hashem had blessed Avraham with everything. The word bakol, with everything, means he had been blessed with a son. If he had a son, he has everything. This was his dream, and this was his wish, and he got it. So, now that he has this son, Avraham said to the senior servant of his household, who was in charge of all that he owned, put your hand under my thigh. This was a tradition of making an oath. And in this case, we know that today we make an oath either holding a holy book, or in the time of the Bet Din. Back then they would actually hold a Torah to give real seriousness to an oath. Nobody would lie holding a Torah scroll. In those days, the only aspect of mitzvah that they had was actually the bris. So that's why the oath was made, placing one's hand under the thigh. That's in the area of the bris. And I will make you swear by God, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. But you will go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Yitzchak. So he's commissioning him, he's entrusting him, Eliezer, his faithful servant, senior servant, he's commissioning him to be the matchmaker to find a match for his son. But he gives him criteria, not from the people of Canaan, in which I live now, it should be from the people of my family. So go back to my origins. Text 1b, then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and set out, taking with him all the bounty of his master. How do you take all the bounty? He was a very rich man, Abraham. How can you possibly take all the wealth with you? You know, there's just recently, something of interest in this region. The Prime Minister of India just cancelled all the large notes, large rupee notes. I think it's 500,000 rupee notes.
500 and 1,000.
Is it 500 and 1,000?
Those two notes.
Those two notes. So the purpose for this is to get rid of black money. In other words, you can bring it to the bank up to the end of the year and explain where you got the money from, declare it, and pay tax. But apparently the penalty for the tax is 200% or something like that. So if you would declare the money, you would pay more tax than you would gain. I have heard, just as a side, that what some people are doing is giving poor people the money, having them declare it, they wouldn't pay much tax, keeping 30-40% and giving the rest to the rich. So apparently there's an industry sprung up around that too. But
it's a good thing.
Why is it that he canceled these notes? Is because people like to keep their value in notes. Now the problem with notes is it doesn't have intrinsic value. So if the government puts notes out of commission and it's no longer legal tender, you've got a problem. Inflation. But here they literally did a move which was, I think, brilliant in some ways. But I feel bad for the people that had possibly hard-earned money. They kept it under the mattress. I don't know what they're going to do. But let's leave India on the side. We all know that throughout our history, it was a Jewish thing to have some diamonds or to have some gold. Why? Because if you had land, as what happened during the Second World War and it happened other times in Jewish history, when you were evicted, when Jews lost their rights, they couldn't sell their land for anything. Unless they had friendly people that would buy it for them, but they were basically made ownerless and stateless. And it took 70 years till families are able to start. Even so, I'm not sure if they got back everything, probably not. Many families never came back. But how can you carry everything you have? Abraham was very wealthy. He had livestock. He had the sheep and so on. So how would you do it? Carry a couple of diamonds, but then you still have stuff back there. You know the way you can carry everything you have? With a promissory note. He had an IOU from Abraham written to Yitzchak saying everything, a promissory note that everything will go to Yitzchak. So if everything is going to Yitzchak, he literally sets out on this mission to find a bride, showing that his master's son Yitzchak is a very wealthy man, taking with him all the bounty of his master. Again, you take all the bounty by taking a promissory note. To understand this in a very easy way, how can somebody lose everything they have at the gambling table? You can't carry your houses to the gambling casino. But what happens is, apparently, I'm coming to this firsthand, you basically have to sign over certain things against the value. So if somebody signed his house, then that document means the house is no longer his. So here he took a document with him. Besides for that, he took all kinds of other good things as well. As we'll see, he had plenty of gifts to give and so on. He took 10 camels. He loaded them up. And he made the camels kneel down and he made his way to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nachor. Nachor is the brother of Abraham. Abraham had two brothers, Nachor and Haran. Haran had a son named Lot, we know that. But here we have a son of Nachor. Nachor had a son called Betuel. And Betuel had a daughter called Rivka and a son called Lavan. who we'll meet up with also later on this year. Okay, he made the camels kneel down by the well outside the city at evening time when the women come out to draw water. Now he had a miraculous arrival because it took him the same day he left, the same day he came. He had what's called kfitzat haderech. Literally the way jumped. He had it jumping over the way. You know, this is a miracle that's God does at various times. But the way took much shorter than it should have. Page 86. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold nose ring, weighing a half shekel, and 2 gold bands for her arms, 10 shekel in weight. Now, what we didn't bring here in the text is a very important part of the story. As Eliezer is going on his way, he says, how in the world is God going to direct me to find the right girl? I mean, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, as we say proverbially. So he made such a prayer to God, and he says, I will go to the city of Abraham's origin, and I will see a girl, and I'll ask her, can she give the camels to drink? I'll ask her for something to drink. And if she says, yes, I'll be happy to give you to drink, and I also want to take care of the camels and give them to drink, then I know this is the girl for the son of my master. Well, this happened. As he comes into the city, he sees a girl going out, and he says, can I have something to drink? And she says, yes. And he says, but besides for giving you to drink, I'll be happy to give the camels to drink as well. And she does that. And he knows that God has answered his prayer. And the first girl he met fit the exact criteria of the scenario he'd spelled out. But now he has to find out, is she the right family? Because Abraham gave him a criteria that has to be his family. So now he asks, pray tell me, whose daughter are you? Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? And she replied, I'm the daughter of Betuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. Okay. She went on. There's plenty of straw and feed at home, and also room to spend the night. So he already knows this is a grandniece of Abraham. So he says, the man bowed low in homage to God, and he said, blessed be Hashem, the God of my master Abraham, who has not withheld his steadfast faithfulness from my master. For I have been guided on my errand by Hashem to the house of my master's kinsman. So this is a fantastic case of divine providence and guidance, where he finds by godly guidance, he finds the right girl. And then there's a whole negotiation and a discussion. And then, just to get to the point, we have here on page 87, that Rivka lifted her eyes and saw Yitzchak after Eliezer successful in convincing them to allow Rivka to come back and meet her son, his master's son. She comes back and Rivka sees Yitzchak, and she let herself down from the camel, and she said to the servant, who is that man walking the field towards us? And the servant said, he's my master. And she took the veil and covered herself. The servant told Yitzchak all the things that he had done. Yitzchak then brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he took Rivka as his wife. Yitzchak loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death. We will come back to this about the order of, in the verse here, where it says that he took Rivka as his wife, and then it says that he loved her. And we will come back to that a little bit later, whether that order is but you'll see that it's exact. So now let us examine a little bit what is involved in a Jewish marriage. And we will see that there was a, so to speak, an evolution. It evolved from the way it was in biblical times to the way it became according to the Jewish law given at Sinai, and then the way it even continued during Talmudic times, and the way it became during more recent times. More recent times, I mean post-Talmudic, maybe for more than 1,000 years. So let's see like this. The Rambam says like follows in text 2, page 88. Before the Torah was given, a man would meet a woman in the marketplace. He just bumped into a woman. And if he and she desired to marry, he would bring her into his home, conduct relations in private, and she would be his wife. There was no formal process of getting married. It was consensual. Both met each other, said, why not? Moved in together, and that was it. Nothing to formalize it. Once the Torah was given, the Jews were commanded that when a man desires to marry a woman, he must first betroth her in the presence of witnesses. Only after this does she become his wife. As alluded to in the verse which states, when a man takes a wife and has relations to her. In other words, first there is a taking. Takes a wife, and then he begins to live with her and have relations with her. And as Rambam continues, we're here in text 2b, this process of betrothal, it's called, so far we're calling it likuchin. This process of betrothal, of taking a wife, fulfills one of the Torah's positive commandments. The process of betrothing a wife is formalized in 3 ways. Either through the transfer of money, or through the transfer of a betrothal document, or through marital relations. This process is termed kiddushin, or as it's called in all texts, erusin. Now and a woman who has been betrothed by the way of one of these 3 means is described as mekudeshet or me'ureset. You may be getting confused at this point, because in Hebrew today, when we say somebody's engaged, it means that she's been given maybe an engagement ring, or she's been given a commitment by her husband-to-be to get married. But that's not what it meant here in the halachic sense of mekudeshet or me'ureset. Let's see what it meant in the full sense of the word. Once this process of betrothal had been formalized, and a woman has become mekudeshet, again, sometimes it's called me'ureset, which means, literally today we would translate it engaged, but no, that doesn't mean engaged, because she has the status of a married woman, even though the marriage bond has not been consummated and she has not been brought into her husband's home. Should anyone other than her husband-to-be engage in marital relations with her, he is liable for execution by the court. If he wishes to divorce her, she requires a get, a halachic bill of divorce. So let's make this very clear. There are 2 processes that take place, that today take place under the same chuppah, which once upon a time used to take place at 2 different times. There's a process called kiddushin. Kiddushin means literally to sanctify, to consecrate her. When something is kadosh, something is holy, it's separate. It's not regular, it's not mundane. So mikudeshet, when somebody sanctifies a woman, it means he makes her separate from the whole pool of men that till now were eligible to marry her, and now she is sacrosanct. She is special, she is only committed to him. Now you know that in Jewish law, biblically, a man could have more than one wife. So he does not become sacrosanct to her in the sense that he's not allowed to marry other wives. Today, of course, we can't even in Jewish law, besides for the civil law. But then it could be. But she is no longer allowed to get married to anybody else. That process is done by giving her money, or by giving her a document, or by having relations. In text 3 we say that the way of actually betrothing a woman through relations was totally outlawed, even in the time of the Talmud, as being inappropriate. In other words, the first it's to be a process where he takes her in a way that has no physical relationship. So either by money or by a document. How do we do it today? Then, let me just say this, then a year later, she was given a year to prepare for her marriage. During that year, again, if she wants to break up, she needs a divorce. If somebody else lived with her, that's a violation of the 10 Commandments. You shall not commit adultery. So there's a quasi-state. She belongs, so to speak. She's holy, she's sanctified, she's sacrosanct. She's specified to this particular man who's given her either money or a document, but she didn't necessarily move into his house yet. She was not yet permissible. They were not permissible to live together until they underwent another formal process, which is called nisu'in. It means formalizing their marriage, consummating their marriage, which is symbolized by them being secluded alone, and which was forbidden till then. So today, and we're going to see this backing up in the text, but let me just already share this. Today, this is all taking place under the one chuppah. In other words, there are various reasons. You see, what would happen is, first of all, there's a financial issue. Let's be realistic. Financial issue is you have to have an engagement party and then a marriage party. 2 parties. That's a big expense. So there would be reason why we would bring those 2 processes together. And there's another very, very formidable reason. And that is, what happens if during the year they wait between engagement, again, not engagement the way we use it today, engagement the way it meant halachically, if he gave her a ring in presence of witnesses and says, you are betrothed to me, you are now sacrosanct to me. If that took place, if one of them disappeared somehow, as unfortunately during our long years of turbulent exiles, you couldn't know if there would be a pogrom or if someone would have to run away, if there would be, then God forbid, this woman could remain forever bound up as an aguna, as a chained woman, not being able to get married. She wouldn't have gotten yet, she needs a divorce. She had never yet had the joy of being married, of actually being together with her husband and living together with him in his house and being taken care of by him in that way. She's still in her, so to speak, in her parents' house. But now she's bound up to him. So in order, and if somebody changed their mind, ran away, you have a problem. So the common practice became that those 2 processes would take place together. So under the chuppah, there's actually 2 things taking place. And that's why there's 2 cups of wine, in case you've noticed. The first thing taking place is kiddushin, where today we don't give money, commonly accepted that we give a ring. There's various symbolisms for the ring. It's a round thing, round that doesn't have a beginning and an end, it's just a complete circle. So we talk about the 2 becoming one complete whole. Various other Kabbalistic reasons for a ring, but the ring has to have a value, a monetary value, and it's the monetary value of the ring which creates that bond. He has to give her something of monetary value, then she becomes mekudeshet, she becomes sanctified or specified to him. We drink a cup of wine, we say the bracha, thanking Hashem for the mitzvah of having betrothals, of having kiddushin. The chassan and the kala take a sip of the wine, and then, just to break up the process, we read the ketubah. He gives her the ketubah, but we read it, and then he gives it to her. The reading of ketubah is not necessary as part of the chuppah. Technically, it's done. One of the reasons it's done is because then it breaks up the first part, the next part. The next part is immediately called nisu'in. Nisu'in means they are now becoming married in a way of living together in the same house. And this should also be done in the presence of 10, the minyan. So they move right over to nisu'in, we fill up another cup of wine, and we make the blessings for nisu'in, for the consummation of the marriage. And in the Sephardi community, at this stage, they may even hold a talus. The chassan has a talus, he opens up his talus, and they hold it over him and the kala. The concept of being under the same canopy is it's like his house, that he's brought her into his house. In the Ashkenazic tradition, after the chuppah, immediately they go to a secluded room for 10 minutes. So till now, they have logically have not been permissible to be together, even just secluded in the same private space. And now, by being secluded in the same private space, they're making a public declaration that he has now brought her into his home, so to speak, and now they are 100% married. So today we do all that bunched together. Back then, it was done as two separate events. And it seems that there was a much more elaborate process of preparing a dowry. Say we give an unmarried woman, a woman who's never been married before, a girl gets 12 months to prepare for her wedding, so the family can prepare the things she'll need for her house, and so on and so forth. So that's the way it used to be. Let's take a look at text 4. Another interesting thing, a woman may only be betrothed voluntarily. If one forces a woman to be betrothed, she is not considered betrothed. Now this is a very, very important law. Why? Because this will say there needs to be a courtship. Right? There needs to be a process whereby she wants to be mikudeshet, she wants to become sanctified or so to speak, solely connected to him. She wants to become engaged. I hesitate to use the word engaged because today when we talk about engagement, it's just a verbal commitment that you will go through with the betrothal at the date of the wedding. But technically, if you break up that commitment, there's nothing wrong with that. You want to, of course, do it nicely and apologize. God forbid, you don't want to get married to another woman later on and then have bad energy because, as we know, if you haven't finished up your business, your prior business properly, and somebody's still upset at you, it's not good. It's not good for the godly energies. You have somebody upset at you, it's never good. If it's not your fault, and if there's a way to fix it, and if there's somebody reasonable on the other side, and you can fix it, you should fix it. So if you go into a marriage and you had a nasty breakup with somebody before that, you should try and find a way that you patch it up. But you never got married, you didn't have a chuppah, you're not committed. There's no commitment there, and you don't have to have a get, you have to have a thing, right? So there should be a process whereby the woman wants to get engaged to this particular man. That process we'll see we refer to as shidduch, the courting process. But let's take a look at text 5, something we just discussed, but let's see it actually in the Rambam. That a woman who has been betrothed, an arusa, again, this is the first half of the chuppah. If that was done, she's forbidden by rabbinic law to engage in marital relations with her husband, as long as she is living in her father's home. In other words, as long as she has not completed the process and done nisu'in. A man who has relations with his arusa, someone engaged to him, in his father-in-law's home, in other words, before he's consummated his marriage by bringing her into his home, is punished with lashes for rebelliousness. Until he brings her into his home, he's secluded with her and dedicates her to him by the process called nisu'in. This seclusion is referred to as entry into the chuppah and is universally referred to as nisu'in, literally marriage. Once an arusa has entered the chuppah and become formally married in the full process, her husband is allowed to have relations with her at any time he desires. Of course, that depends on the laws of family purity, the laws of nida, and she's considered to be his wife with regard to all matters, as they become totally bonded. Once she enters the chuppah, she's called a nesu'ah, although the couple has not consummated the marriage. You see, the first part of the chuppah that we do traditionally was not done under a chuppah. The first part, where the giving of the ring, when it was done separately as a separate process, was done just anywhere in front of two witnesses. The chuppah part, the fact that we put up a canopy or we stand under a talus or something like that, that's for the second part of the chuppah. That's for the nisu'in. That's because that represents bringing her into his space, into his home. So they stand together under the same roof. In text 6, we bring text to what I just shared with you. Nowadays, the custom is that erusin is conducted only at the time of the chuppah. Therefore, the blessings for erusin and nisuim are recited together one after another. That's why a chuppah has a two-part process, which seems to most people just as one long ritual, but it's actually contained within it two subsets, two portions, kiddushin and nisuim. And that's why many people, for example, will be very careful not to give an engagement ring at what we call today engagement. Because if the guy gives the bride-to-be a ring in the presence of two witnesses, although he hasn't said the words, "I want you to be mikudeshet to me, to be sacrosanct to me, to be dedicated to me," but the moment he has said, but the concept of giving her directly from him to her a ring could create that same, in front of witnesses, could create a scenario where perhaps they are already considered married in some way. And if they break up, maybe they would need to actually have a bill of divorce. And that wouldn't be very pleasant. So that's why the tradition is that the very, I'm guessing that those that are observant and are aware of this, the tradition is to give the engagement ring after the chuppah. So you buy it before. Usually the wedding ring is a plain wedding band. It's a simple ring of gold or silver, so that one knows that there's what the value is. You see it. You see it's a precious metal. You can basically see the value. With a stone, you never know the real value. And so it may be, we're scared, if you give a stone as the engagement, not the engagement, as the mekudeshet ring, as the ring under the chuppah, maybe she's thinking, wow, that's a 5 carat, how much is 5 carats? I don't know, $100,000 stone. Oh, he really loves me. Yeah, I'm going to agree to this. But then she goes and gets it checked out. It turns out it's a cubic zirconia, and it has the value of, in order to fulfill a kiddushin, you only need the value of a shaveh pruta, which is about 5 cents, 20, maybe 25 cents, whatever. Just the value of the smallest coin of the Talmudic time. It wasn't very much. But if somebody thinks that they're getting $100,000, and it turns out it's worth $25, there's a problem there, because we have to think maybe she only agreed because she thought. So that's why we don't have any stone in that ring. We don't have. Try and have a very simple ring. So basically, see what you get. She sees, okay, it's a gold or silver ring. It obviously has a value of more than a pruta, of more than a basic Aramaic coin back then. As today, maybe it's a couple of pennies, 20, 25 cents. I'm not sure how much it is in today's value, but certainly that ring she's getting is worth more. There's no questions. After the chuppah, tradition is you want your wife to have a diamond ring, so you can give it to her afterwards. The problem being, if you give it to her before, there may be some issue of already creating a process of kiddushin, which should really only be left till the chuppah in our days. Okay. Now, let's look at 7a. Rav is one of the sages of the Talmud. Talking 2,000 years ago approximately, he would give lashes to one who betrothed the woman in the street. In other words, he didn't know her, he just said, oh, hey, you look really beautiful. Will you be my wife? Here's a ring. 2 witnesses? Hello. Inappropriate. Or to one who consecrated through marital relations and didn't go through the process of first giving a ring and having a chuppah and so on. And to one who consecrated without shidduchim. Oh, sorry, so I read it wrong. I should correct myself. Somebody who does it in the street means he doesn't make a special event out of it. He doesn't make it in a special place. He just does it cavalierly, casually, without taking it seriously. I think that's what it means. But we could look up the Talmud in 12b, Kiddushin, and we could see just for sure. But the third one is what I was getting at, and that is he also would give lashes to one who consecrated without shidduchim. Somebody who went through the process of giving a ring without first knowing her, knowing who she is, getting to know her on some level. Why is that? Because text 7b tells us that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, it is prohibited for a man to betroth, to be mekadesh, a woman, let's give the ring and do this process, until he sees her. He can't have a male or a bride. For if he does not, then once he does betroth her, perhaps he will find something unappealing about her, and he will be repulsed by her. Thus he will have violated that which the Torah says, that you shall love your fellow as yourself. You see what happens is, imagine he tells his father, you know what? I want you to choose why don't you choose a girl for me? Or actually, the tradition here is there's actually a local story. The old Mr. Gerson, Mr. Chaim Gerson, who moved here, I'm not sure when he moved here, 1910s maybe, or maybe something, 20s maybe. He came here with a wife who passed away basically soon after he got here. And he needed to get married again. Of course, he wanted to get a Jewish wife, so he wrote to his brother in Russia. He said, please try and find somebody for me. And they found him what he thought would be a good shidduch, a good match. They started conversing. He said, please send me a full picture, because you just send a picture of the face. How do I know you have feet, you can walk, you can stand, you know? Anyway, they communicated that way, and then she made her way over to this part of the world, and they met in Singapore, and there was a rabbi in Singapore, they got married there. But what he's talking here about, getting married to somebody you don't know, let's say, going under the chuppah, relying on somebody else, under the chuppah she's veiled, giving her a ring, taking her home, and just discovering, perhaps, when you take her home and you're fully married, oh, I can't look at this person. That's not nice. And then you're going to get divorced. That's not fair to her. If you want to make a commitment to her, you should first make sure that you know who she is. And of course, as we said, you cannot do this process to a woman if she doesn't want. So of course she has to get to know who he is. So there needs to be at least some form of meeting so that they see each other, they see that they are that they know what's going on, they know each other, they're human beings, and that they have some kind of a basis for a relationship. So let's look at text 8, which really puts into, Rashi already notes that such is the custom of grooms. Rashi passed away, right, passed away already in 1105, so we're talking about 900 years ago. He says, such is the custom of grooms. After the betrothal feast, he again sends gifts to his betrothed and feasts there. And then in text 9, it is the custom of all the people of your city to perform the engagement, shidduchim, without betrothal, and to give gifts at the time of the engagement or afterwards. Only then does the betrothal take place in proximity to the chuppah. There is no one who first betroths and then gives gifts. In other words, telling us here an important part of the process, the gifts. What do the gifts do? In other words, before they actually get married, there needs to be some form of a relationship, of a connection built. You can't come into the marriage without having some kind of a familiarity with the person, and some kind of a feeling towards the person, which is engendered, which is supported by gifts and so on. Now, remember, we said that a woman who's not married, even if she's already been given the ring, but the second part of the marriage had not been fulfilled under the chuppah, she cannot not yet move into her husband's home. She's still, while she needs a get to be separated from him, she still cannot be intimate with him. She hasn't done the second part of the process. How much more so if the betrothal has not even taken place, right? If she hasn't even gotten the ring yet. When we talk about engagement today, it's nothing. It's just, in Yiddish we say, there's a party that we do in Yiddish today. There's two ways we describe this. Either Tanaim, people write up stipulations that this guy says, I'm going to marry this girl on this date, I'm going to give her gifts. It's basically a prenuptial, not what's called today legally prenuptial agreement. It's basically a commitment that we're committed to marry each other. Then, or there is what is called, we don't even like to do that at the time of quote-unquote engagement, because that's also something written, it's also a document, it's also some kind of a commitment. And what happens if they break up? It's not nice to break up from a commitment of that level. It's no biblical problem, and she doesn't need to get, but so what we do today, particularly in the Chabad community, right after a boy and girl meet and they decide they want to commit to each other to get married, they have a process, it's called avort. Vort means word, means they give their word to each other that they're committed to marry each other. And then the marriage can take place 6 weeks later, 2 months later, half a year later, whatever it is. They've gegeben dem Wort. They gave their word to each other. So it's called avort. And it's a less elaborate event. It's cakes and snacks, l'chaim, and people come by and say mazel tov, and it's a joyous event. We actually leave the writing of the written tanoim, of the stipulations, to right before the chuppah. You'll see at many chuppahs, the rabbi is sitting there before the chuppah doing two things: writing the tanoim, writing the stipulations, so to speak. And it says the couple has agreed to get married on this and this day, and then they're getting married in an hour. But we do it as a, you don't have to do tanoim, but we do it as it's part of the tradition. Then he'll fill out the ketubah and make sure that the husband commits to the monetary compensation in case something happens to him, either if he dies, God forbid, or if he wants to get divorced. That's not just you can just finish it and that's it. There's a monetary issue, And then you'll go to the chuppah where what takes place is, as we said, the kiddushin. He gives her the ring in the presence of two witnesses. The witnesses are critical. You'll hear the witnesses being called up to the chuppah and being identified. The rabbi will usually say, these are the witnesses to the exclusion of all others. Because there may be other people that are related and they can't be witnesses and so on. So we want to know that there are two kosher witnesses witnessing him giving her the ring, and she becomes mikudeshet. You will hear the rabbi say afterwards mikudeshet, and the witnesses say mikudeshet means she is now betrothed to this man. Technically, if God forbid something happened and they had to run away from the chuppah at that stage, she cannot get married to somebody else until she gets either consummated with him or a bill of divorce from him, or God forbid if he dies. Now, what we do immediately thereafter, after we read the ketubah, we move on to the second part of the marriage, which was called nisu'in. He has her in his space under the chuppah. The Sephardic communities even under the same talis, just him and her under the same talis. The Ashkenazi communities, afterwards they go into a secluded room for 10 minutes. That is the process of marriage. Now let's look a little bit at the preliminary. Okay, the marriage is halachic, we know, but how do we get there? This is where it will be interesting for us, particularly today. So let's look at text 10, the word shidduchim. What does it mean, shidduchim? So interesting that the Ran, who passed away in 1380, great commentator of the Talmud, he wrote like this: the word shidduchim is derived from the quietude and comfort that a woman finds in her husband's house. As it is written, may you find rest each woman in her husband's house. And the Aramaic translation for "the land rested" is v'shiduchat ala. So it means kind of comfort, quiet. You know, let's be honest. When somebody gets married, if they marry the right person, there should be a certain happiness, but even a certain calm, serenity, that now there's somebody to take care of her. Now she has a man. Now she doesn't have to, the search is over, so to speak. He should feel that way too, no question about it. But there's Talmud does identify that there's women have an innate desire to be married more than men. So we can discuss that sociologically and psychologically, but there's no question that for a woman, having a home, having a husband, having a family, and doing the homely things is traditionally, and even today, still something that they look forward to from when they're little girls. You'll find often playing house and playing with dolls and so on and so forth. Again, whether the old discussion, whether it's nurture or nature, whether boys become interested in cars because everybody buys them cars, and girls become interested in dolls and doll houses because that's what they buy them, or whether there's something innate about it, we'll leave for another discussion. But the fact is that shidduchim, we're saying here, basically means that it's a certain calm. So what do we refer to now when we talk about shidduchim? We talk about the process of arriving at that calm. And that's actually not very calm. For anybody that's been involved in trying to find a match for themselves, for their loved one, for their kids, it's not very easy. But eventually, hopefully, when it's successful, you come to the calm, serenity of a good home. So let's take a look here at text 11. The process of a matchmaker. You think it's a new process? No. Here we have the Ramah speaking, documenting this in halacha, in Jewish law. The Ramah is the famous codifier of the Ashkenazic custom. He passed away in 1572. So how many years ago is that? It's a little bit less than 450 years ago. He writes like this: a matchmaker is like a middleman. If the matchmaker wants to be paid immediately upon making the match, for his service in making the match, and the families of the engaged couple do not wish to pay before the marriage, they say, they didn't get married yet, maybe they'll break up. The law depends on local custom. In the absence of prevailing custom, the law accords with the families. Look, you want money from them, you have to convince them. If they want to wait till the marriage, but definitely he plays an important role, and we understand that he does deserve to get a fee. Actually, very, very interesting that in today's very observant society, the money that you pay a shadchan is considered very important. It's one of the things you don't want to miss out on. First of all, it's basic hakarat hatov. It's basic gratefulness. Somebody took the time to think of an idea. Somebody took the time to suggest the idea. In the religious circles, he even sets up the first few dates. And, he's invested in it. You want to pay him. You also want to encourage people to be doing this. Because how does it take place in a very Orthodox society? It still takes place with a shadchan. Yesterday I met somebody he told me his mother is from America, but I knew his father grew up, his father's Australian. I said, how did they meet? And I said, oh, the moment I asked the question, I said, oh, obviously a shadchan. He says, yeah, a shadchan. People ask, how did I meet my wife? She's from California and I was in New York. Well, obviously, a matchmaker. Somebody said, I know the guy, I think they go, okay. And so there's a match. It's a very, very important process. Actually, some people say, oh, it's old-fashioned, it's prudish, how are you going to match up? It sounds ridiculous. Hey, 1 second. If you hear how people get married without a matchmaker, it's even more ridiculous. How is a person supposed to? Where's he supposed to meet his future spouse? Where? At the barber? Serendipity, which is hashgacha pratit, divine providence. So actually, you're leaving a lot more to chance and to faith when you do it without a matchmaker. Matchmaker is actually, yes, that's controlled by God, but we don't say, well, I'll go out in the morning without a job and God will provide. No, we try and do things that will be able to, in the ways of nature, make it work. So actually, the old-fashioned way of a matchmaker is not at all so old-fashioned. As a matter of fact, today, the world has come back to it. The world has professional matchmakers, professional matchmaking services, which the only thing that makes sense. You want to find out what kind of a person is she looking for, what kind of a person is he looking for, and try and bring it together. Now, what some people may get confused with is they think, well, it's a prearranged match, so the parents decided and the kids have no choice. Now, while that did take place on some level, did take place in the olden days times, and in some communities still does take place, but remember, it cannot be only based on somebody else's decision. There needs to be, said before, there needs to be a desire of both parties to get married. How does that take place? So we know halachically, look at the halacha in text 12. Shulchan Aruch says, a student who wishes to go to a particular place of Torah study, where he is confident that he will see success in his studies with the teacher there, and his father protests. So you have a biblical commandment of honor your father and mother. Father says, I don't want you to go out of town to study. And his son feels, if he stays at home, his study is going to be stifled. There's a very special teacher he can go to. He does not need to listen to his father in this matter. So too, if a father protests against his son marrying a woman of his choosing, he does not need to listen to his father. In other words, obviously, if the son doesn't want to marry the girl the father has chosen, he doesn't have to. And if the father doesn't agree to the match that the son has taken, he doesn't have to agree. This is something that needs to be the express decision of the young man and of the young girl. The only exception was that in biblical times, a father could arrange a marriage for his daughter when she's under 12. Then it's not up to her, it's up to him. But when she gets to 12, she can have a quick exit if she doesn't like him. She comes before the basis, she refuses. She does what's called a miyun. She says, I refuse to be with this person, I don't like him. And she gets an exit without even a get. However, after she's 12, at any age after that she gets married. Well, legally in America you can, but in Jewish law, after she's 12, she can get married. Certainly after. So then it'll have to be based on what she wants. So what happens today in some communities, which is very, very, which is on the, in a certain way an extreme, the parents will do all the investigation, the homework, and find what they think would be a good match. Then the boy and the girl, will meet for an hour or two, or whatever it is. Both sets of parents will be outside in another room, and they will expect that probably both are very young. You're usually talking about a boy who's 19 and a girl who's maybe 18, or 19 or 17, or a boy could be 20 or 21, but very young. And you're assuming that based on the backgrounds of the families and the similarities and the things the parents have found out, they can usually almost expect that the couple will come out and say, Mazel Tov, we agree to get married to each other. Now that is in certain circles. In, for example, Chabad tradition. That doesn't take place like that at all. The parents do the sleuthing, they do the investigative work. They'll be in touch with the shadchan, with the matchmaker. The matchmaker, if he asks the boy or the girl, who should I contact if I have an idea for you? Usually they will say, call my father, call my mother. Don't even tell me the name because it's very disturbing. A boy's studying or a girl's involved in her life. He doesn't want to hear. And the parents have the ability of being at an armchair distance. They can say who the family is, they can ask friends of the boy or girl what they're like, are they nice, what kind of things are they interested in. A good question to ask is, what do they do when they're angry? Because, it's bound to be that, I've even heard of a technique that maybe on a date, if a girl wants to check out what he's like when he's angry, if she drops a cup by accident or something like that, or she does something clumsy, and then see how he reacts. If he blows up, stay away. But okay, those are just little tricks of the trade. But after the parents have decided that this is probably this has a good chance of being a proper match, then the two young people will meet. Very often they will go out to a hotel lobby, a public place of some nature, but not in the street. And they'll talk, and they'll discuss different things. And then the question will be, is this the one that they want to marry? Now, how will they know? So first of all, let's take text 13 here, what the Lubavitcher Rebbe tells us, that the entire matter of a shidduch and marriage transcends the bounds of nature, as per the well-known statement of our sages who liken marriage to the splitting of the sea. And here we have a story of a Roman matron, a Roman dignitary who thought, well, why does God need to be involved in marriages? I can do the same. And she took all her servants and all her maidservants and she lined them up and she paired them, one with the other. And the next day they all came bruised up. They were not good matches. They didn't survive the night together. And she says, okay, I understand when we say that God does matches, I understand that this is truly something godly. It's not just arbitrarily to match up. He has pants, she has a skirt, put them together. That doesn't work like that. Now, there's another quote here, and that is that the Talmud says, 40 days before the birth of a child, a heavenly voice proclaims, the daughter of so-and-so will be married to so-and-so. So that's one important thing. Now, so what do we have to do? If it's from God and if it's divinely ordained, so do we have to really be concerned about it? Take a look at 14a, a text from the previous Rebbe of Lubavitch, Rabbi Yosef, who writes to somebody, surely you remember what I told you, that one must actively seek out a good shidduch. One should not be miserly with regard to the times invested in traveling to see a prospective partner. This is something you have to invest in as much as you invest in anything else important. And unfortunately, we find sometimes that people invest in their career, and you ask them, what are you doing about marriage? They say, well, I'm on J-date. I don't think that's necessarily... First of all, J-date, you have to be very careful. Not everybody on J-date is Jewish. To be careful before you can't just take it into as a given. But more than that, that's not the way you advance your career. It's not the way you do anything else in your life you really care about. You have to put more thought into it, more effort into it. And if you need to travel for it, if you need to go, it has to be something. You say really it's from God. So how are you going to? But you need to invest in it as well. Now, how are you going to know if it's the right person? So there's an interesting story somebody shared here of the Rebbe. There's a girl who was not from Hasidic family, but she had come to learn the early years of the Rebbe's leadership in the 1920s, 1960s, 57, 20s, 1960s probably. The Rebbe was a man who she could consult with, and she had consulted with him about a shidduch that was she was going out with a young man. She wanted to know, do you think this is for me? And the Rebbe asked her in a way that she was a little surprised. The Rebbe said, do you like this man? And she wasn't expecting a bearded Hasidic Rebbe to ask her, does she like this man? So she said, I have stam avas Yisrael for him. I have basic love of fellow Jew for him. The Rebbe smiled and said, "For a man, darf man haben mehr wie stam avas Yisrael." For a marriage, for a husband,
You have to have more than just plain love of fellow Jew. In other words, there's something that you have to identify here, that there needs to be some kind of a emotional attraction to the person. What the shadchan can do, what the parents can do, is only one thing. They can only figure out if the mathematics, if the equations seem to fit. If intellectually these people seem that they would be well suited for each other. They share common values, they share common ancestry, they share common background, they want the same things in life. It looks like they would be good for each other. But what you cannot know is, how do they feel for each other? That's something entirely subjective. So look here at the Rebbe's advice in text 14b. The way the Rebbe says, I was pleased to read in your letter that you found many positive qualities in the young man you have been meeting's personality, and that he fits the bill with regards to what you are looking for in a young man whom you wish to marry. You also hope that maybe there are additional fine qualities that have as yet not become known to you. You are correct when you write that in matters such as these, there must be some positive emotional feeling towards the young man as well, not only that it makes sense intellectually. This is logically understandable as well. Marriage consists of constructing a complete edifice, one that will endure for all eternity. As such, it must be an edifice and home that is united and coupled in all aspects. In emotional aspects as well, not only joined intellectually. On the other hand, one cannot always easily discern where the intellectual deliberations end and the emotional considerations begin. Quite often, although one may think that his or her position on the matter is purely a matter of intellectual reflection, in point of fact, it is in large part, if not overwhelmingly so, a matter of emotional consideration. It is therefore my hope that after you meet with him additional times, you will be able to discern this matter for yourself, that there is not only intellect in the matter of your appreciation for him, but emotion as well. In light of the above, if you are sure that as of yet you harbor no emotional feelings at all, then it would seem that it is too soon to make a decision regarding this matter. However, if you see that positive emotional feelings are also integrated in your appreciation for him, then it may be God's will that the shidduch be with success in the good and auspicious hour. Here we see the fusion of intellect and emotion, and the very important way to distinguish between them. And let me say like this. Unfortunately, we live in an era, a Hollywood-influenced era, where we think of marriage as romance, where we think of bells and whistles that have to be going off before somebody will be married. And very often, when somebody says love at first sight, sorry to say, but it may be hormones at first sight. So what's done by the shidduch process is that, first of all, there is an analytical thinking, there's an intellectual thinking by people that are a little bit, that care for the people, care for the sons and daughters, but they're not yet involved emotionally in this process. Once they've established that these are good people that to meet each other, now the people can meet each other. Now we have to establish that not just do they have common grounds intellectually, which probably we know already before they meet, but that they jive, that they connect emotionally. Sometimes there'll be very quickly the chemistry that's needed, and again, no physical chemistry, but the chemistry, the pull of the heart, the comfortability one with the other, the excitement that one has when one meets the other, which says this is the one. Now, because they've already done, the parents or the shadchan, the matchmaker has done all the groundwork, they can walk in actually and be vulnerable in a certain way. Not too vulnerable in the beginning, but they know that there's a background, there's a basis. They can get to the real task of meeting each other for the sake of marriage. Now, sometimes a person will date a couple of times, they don't know. Is it for me, is it for me? So here we need to know, do you have a feeling? Is there an emotional feeling for a person? Isn't there? Sometimes the people will be advised, take a break. Or, because absence makes the heart grow fonder, sometimes you say, wow, I can't imagine if I would lose this guy, or he says if I would lose her, I would be pretty devastated. Sometimes you have to ask that question. A parent or a coach who's coaching a young person through the process in our community will have to sometimes ask, what would be if that person, you heard that person walked out of your life and went and got engaged to somebody else tomorrow? Sometimes from the reaction, you see, wow, this person really is already involved emotionally. Sometimes it's difficult for some people to identify when they're emotionally attached to something, but sometimes it's easier for them to identify that they would be very distraught if that was taken away. And by that, they can know that, yes, it's a sign they're emotionally attached. So this is really the way that marriage goes from the true perspective of traditional Jewish life. Now, remember what I said? We said that Yitzchak got married to Rivka, he brought her into his mother's tent, and he loved her. He got married to her, and he loved her. So here there's in a story that somebody who was quite a modern girl in her time, and again, this is in the 1940s, she had lost her father, and she went to see the Rebbe, and the Rebbe advised her on a shidduch. And I think here on page 110. A few months later, when I went on a visit to New York with some friends, I decided to go see the Rebbe again. The appointment was made from Boston, and on the specified date, I arrived at 7:70. And she goes on to say she was awkward, she didn't know anybody there, but then she went into the Rebbe's room. At first, we discussed my studies. The Rebbe asked me at length about my courses, my professors, my interests and plans for the future. Then, to my great surprise, he asked me about my very personal plans, about my dating to get married. I told him that I had met several young men, but I had not met someone I wanted to marry. The Rebbe smiled broadly and asked my opinion about a specific student who she had dated. I swallowed hard. I could not believe it, that the question concerned a young man I had recently met. It's possible the young man had also written to the Rebbe asking his opinion. The Rebbe, it could be prophecy also, but it could be very possibly that the young man had written. I swallowed hard. The Rebbe then asked about another student, and a third, and I was totally overwhelmed. He apparently knew everything about my life, certainly in this aspect. I just shook my head and blushingly explained why each one was not the right one for me. Then the Rebbe chuckled lightly and told me that I read too many books. How did he know? But no, he did. Love, he explained to me, is not that which is portrayed in romantic novels. It isn't that overwhelming, blinding emotion that is portrayed in a romance. These books do not portray real life, he said. It's a fantasy world, a make-believe world with made-up emotions. Fiction is just that, fiction, but real life is different. And then as a father to a daughter, he began to explain to me the meaning of real love. Love, he told me, is an emotion that increases in strength throughout life. It is sharing and caring and respecting one another. It is building a life together, a unit of family and home. The love that you feel as a young bride, he continued, is only the beginning of real love. It is through the small, everyday acts of living together that love flourishes and grows. And so he continued, the love you feel after 5 years or 10 years is a gradual strengthening of bonds. As two lives unite to form one, with time one reaches a point where each partner feels a part of the other, where each partner can no longer visualize life without his mate by his side. Smilingly, he told me to put aside the romantic notions developed by my literary involvement and view love and marriage in a meaningful way. I walked out of the Rebbe's office with a huge smile on my face. The Rebbe knew how to communicate with a dreamy young girl. He knew what to say and how to say it. His words spoken from the heart reverberated within my heart. That is my Rebbe. So, and then she got married and had a good life. But this concept is hinted at in the verse where it says Yitzchak married Rivka and then loved her. Yes, there has to be an attraction, it has to make sense intellectually, there has to be an emotional attraction. But real love truly comes only after one is married, and one develops, one gives, they give to each other, and so on and so forth. And in this, just in the closing letter of the Rebbe writes to somebody, I received your letter on May 13th in which you ask in your son's name my advice regarding the shidduch that's being suggested for him. Your son is not sure if the parents of the girl will be able to assist the young couple with large sums of money. My opinion is that since you write that she has qualities that are suitable for your son, this is what is most important regarding a shidduch. With regard to livelihood and money, God will help them. Most probably, at least at the beginning of their marriage, the parents of both parties will assist them. Especially considering that which you write that the girl's parents own a factory. But I'll tell you a joke in this regard. There was a guy who wanted to get married, and he was a kibbutznik. He was on a kibbutz, and he needed a new tractor desperately. You put up a sign on the kibbutz billboard, looking to get married to girl with tractor. Please send pictures of tractor. It's ridiculous. How much money, not money. Marriage is a lifetime decision. It's something that far supersedes money and all these other kinds of considerations. May Hashem bless all of those that are looking for shidduchim, looking for their children for matches, or grandchildren for matches, or whatever it may be. It should be with a lot of success. And a gute shoah, a lot of mazel.
It's taking a long time to turn it off.
It's the black button. You have to move it to not.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, yeah, I did it.
Yeah. Are you actually live all the time?
Yeah, but
Is it going off?
not yet.
Oh, the clock's on.
Yeah. No, let's pull up.
Turn off and that's all.
Yeah.
Pull out the what's it called?
No, there's only the battery. It's not the.
It's the only way to really know you're off. No, it's still on though.
It's still on because.
Pull out the internet wire.